So Mojang just released a new snapshot, and I want to talk about it a little bit. Now, there are a lot of interesting things in the snapshot, but the thing that I want to focus on the most are villagers. Essentially, Mojang has nerfed villagers and made trading halls like this much more difficult to make. Now, they've essentially done 3 things to make it more challenging. So the first thing they've done is make it so that if you have an efficiency villager, right, the maximum level that that villager can sell you is efficiency 3. Now, the way it's been previously is that there was a lower chance of getting efficiency 5, but it was possible. Additionally, they made some enchantments biome-specific. So, for example, my mending villager would actually not be able to sell mending because he's a plains villager. And in this new update, theoretically speaking, only the jungle villagers would be able to sell mending. They've given us a helpful guide to show where to get which enchantments from which biome, but that is the basic gist. The final thing they're proposing patching out is disabling stacking discounts. For example, this guy sells sharpness 5, which would normally be 26 emeralds in a book. However, because he's been zombified and cured, he only charges 5. Now, with all of my villagers, I've only cured each one twice, but theoretically, you can cure this as many times as you want until every single villager is only 1 diamond per book. Now, I think making it so you can only get certain levels from certain villagers, I think actually is a good idea, because that encourages you to use other methods, like actual enchanting tables, or exploring the world to find higher level enchantments. However, it doesn't make trading with villagers totally useless, because you can always combine your books in an anvil. The other thing I'm okay with is getting rid of the stacking discounts. That was always a bit of a bug and not really a feature, but it is one we got used to. However, it did feel a little cheap and didn't always feel, like, correct. Like, it clearly wasn't what Mojang intended, and I think patching it is fair. To be honest, getting a lot of emeralds, especially late game, is not that hard, and I think making books more expensive is actually a really good change. However, the change that I think is actually a terrible idea is making certain books biome-specific. Now, let me explain why. Now, first of all, under this new method, a lot of books wouldn't even be available from villagers. Now, I don't really see why, because it's not really the significant ones. It's like stuff with like fishing rods and tridents. I understand that those are, I guess, are like more water utility items, but I still don't see why villagers couldn't sell them. Like, if the logic is, oh, a villager doesn't use that tool, villagers also don't use swords or shovels or pickaxes, so I'm not sure why they can't use fishing rods or tridents either. Now, disregarding that for a second, though, oh my god, phantoms. The much bigger issue is making them biome-specific. And the reason for that, can I get out of here? The reason for that is because it doesn't really make it more difficult, it just makes it more annoying. Now, creating a giant villager trading hall like I've created here, this is a very late game project. Now, obviously you don't have to build a massive structure around it. I missed. But in general, having a giant trading hall is already a late game feature. Most players don't do this. Can you please go away? What I was trying to say is that even without all this infrastructure and without doing redstone and doing all these different things to make it organized, most players still don't do this. It's pretty rare for most players to have this many villagers and keep them this organized and put in the effort to try to get every single book. The truth is, all they're doing is punishing players who try to spend more time in the game. If you have the ability to have an elytra and build all of this and get all these villagers and breed them up and get all the emeralds and like all of that, moving a villager from the jungle to a plains or whatever, it's not hard, it's just time consuming. And I think that's the difference. The other features limit what you're able to do, but this doesn't actually limit your ability, it just makes it slightly more inconvenient. And I don't really see why Mojang would want to do that. Now, this is my single player world. I want to show you some things, right? So right here, this area is a jungle. Now over here is plains and forest. All the way up here is what is the nearest swamp. All the way down here is the nearest desert. All the way down here is my nearest taiga. And the point I'm trying to illustrate is that these are so far apart and so spread out that actually getting all the villagers together would just be so unbelievably inconvenient. But it's not impossible. It would just be annoying. And I think that's the point Mojang's missing. They're not making it more difficult, they're making it more annoying. Now, I choose to use leather armor because I like the way it looks more. I think it's more decorative, but I have netherite armor. I don't need more. Why is it? It is not Christmas time. What? That's really strange. It's not Christmas time. It's like August. My point is, I have netherite, I have an elytra, I have an ender chest, I have lots of things. I have all this stuff. Me transporting villagers isn't an impossible task, it's just an annoying one. Making books biome-specific will only limit the player, and it's going to end up leading to a lot of frustrating experiences trying to move villagers or, breed them or whatever. And I just don't really see much point because the players who are really dedicated are still going to do it. All you're doing is locking more casual players out of a more challenging option. I sort of feel like I'm repeating myself, but to make my point crystal clear, villager trading halls are and always have been a late game thing to do. It's not something most casual players do. So all you're doing is spreading the gap between the hardcore the more hardcore type players and casual players, you're dividing them even further because you're making certain things inaccessible. I personally am for nerfing villagers. I think they're overpowered. I choose to use them late game because they're just easier than trying to like go hunting for mending books like around my world, and I just don't have the space on my computer to load that many chunks. But I also think leaving the option to get a villager trading hall but just making it more inconvenient isn't the play. There are ways to make it difficult without making it frustrating. Now, I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't just complain without offering solutions, so I do want to offer some other options that aren't just making the books biome-specific and making the player, like, potentially have to travel thousands of blocks to move villagers. One feature that already exists in the game is being able to put a book and quill on a lectern. What I propose is being able to put enchanted books on lecterns as well. The idea behind this would be that if there was a villager that was studying to be a librarian, like Cynthia here, if they can, yeah, see Cynthia just became a librarian. If this were to have Luck of the Sea on the lectern, then now Cynthia has the ability to have Luck of the Sea when maybe they wouldn't be otherwise. So for example, if you still want to have the biome-specific books where like only jungle villagers can sell you mending, but maybe with this system you can have it so that if the lectern has mending on the book, then the chance for the librarian to sell you mending is also applied to a plains villager. This sort of gives you the best of both worlds, because it still encourages you to go out exploring, because you need to find the initial mending book, but once you have one, you're able to sort of replicate it in a way similar, but still requiring just as much work as it did previously. Another method I think could work well is making more desirable trades like mending or higher level enchantments like unbreaking or efficiency. I think they could be tied to completing your raids. Now, for example, let's say if villagers can't normally sell you mending, maybe if you have the Hero of the Village effect, there are temporary trades that unlock that will only be there while you have the effect, and then they can sell you mending. This ties into the pillaging system, which honestly there isn't much of a point to other than getting the discount already, but again, like I already said, if you're playing late game, getting a lot of emeralds isn't that hard. Villagers already have a system where if you have Hero of the Village, they'll throw random stuff at you, except the stuff they throw at you kind of sucks if you're late game, because then if it unlocks temporary trades, you're more encouraged to try to do a lot more trading in that window, and you're encouraged to get Hero of the Village and actually do raids late game. My final suggestion is less of a specific suggestion, but it's more so that what if instead of making it harder from villagers, just make it easier or more desirable to get other methods. I play Minecraft practically every day, as you might be able to tell from the size of my world, but I don't think I have ever, in all my time playing for the past 10 years, ever gotten a mending book from a loot chest. I know it's possible, but it's so rare that even if I got one, it wouldn't really be sustainable. The only way to reliably get mending is to exploit villagers, so I think if Mojang doesn't want you to exploit villagers, they need to give you other ways to get mending. It would definitely need to be more expensive, but what if, similar to how cartographers can duplicate maps, you could use a lectern or some other block to duplicate books? Now, again, that would be really expensive, and that could, also be an issue if you just duplicate a bunch of mending books, but in theory, I feel like that's not a bad idea. It could be a new functionality for the enchanting table, for example, where it lets you transcribe an enchanting book, and maybe that also costs levels, but it's an alternative method instead of just using villagers. You could even make better enchantments cost more, so maybe transcribing like an efficiency 1 book only costs 3 levels, but transcribing a mending book costs like 12. That would probably need some tweaking and balancing, but the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think removing functionality from villagers is necessarily the solution. It's only going to frustrate players and who want mending. I'm not exactly sure how long this video will end up being, because I'm probably going to edit down quite a bit because I tend to ramble, but my point I'm trying to illustrate is that I think Mojang needs to be careful at how they handle nerfing villagers. I do think they're doing good steps in the right direction. I just worry that instead of making it more difficult, they're just going to make it more annoying. I don't think that's a good solution because villagers are already quite annoying. I also think it's important to understand the type of players that make giant villager trading halls. Most players don't do that. The only players that do that are the long-term, highly advanced players. And I think effectively making your most loyal players' lives more annoying isn't really a good option. To be honest, a lot of people don't know that mending exists. Truly, I've played with a lot of casuals recently, and a lot of them don't know mending. A lot of them just don't know that mending exists. And I don't think making mending restricted to a jungle biome is necessarily the way to go, especially because villagers don't even spawn in jungles. I just worry that Mojang is trying to overcompensate for an issue that isn't really affecting that much of the player base. But those are just my thoughts. Honestly, it won't really affect me that much because I have a long-term world. All my villagers already exist. In the past, when they've changed something with villagers, they haven't deleted all the other villagers. They've just made it so you can't get them anymore. So I'll probably be fine because I already have all the villagers I could ever want. I'm worried more if for new players who want to try these projects that I've been able to participate in, they just won't have that option. I think the biggest problem is removing player freedom just doesn't fit Minecraft. And I think rather than making something impossible, just give them an alternative. But anyways, thank you. Goodbye.